Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar hosted by the Quality Board for Icelandic Higher Education titled Teaching and Learning Post-COVID, What Lies Ahead? Before starting the handing it over to our opening remarks, I want to go through some practical information. My name is Sigurður Óli Sigurðsson, and I'm the member of the Secretariat for the Quality Board for Icelandic Higher Education. And I want to note that this event is being recorded and videos of sessions will be publicly available online after the conference. I ask that attendees please mute speaker at all times and turn off camera.
Já, góðan dag, ég ætla að fá að panta tíma hjá Óla.
I can hear people actually now as they are
bara fyrir fyrst, hann búin að vera að fresta mér að það í sig.
Excuse
Maria,
me.
Maria Arnardóttir.
Maria, can you please?
Nei, bara klipping.
Can you not, Sigurður, can you not mute her? Can you not mute her?
Bara mjög flott tími.
I will try to mute. I think I have to stop the screens here.
8-6.
There we go. Okay. Perfect, thank you.
So, excuse me, Siggy, you want us to shut off the pictures? Yeah.
Please, unless you are contributing to the conference. Presenters may have cameras on. We ask that you write your questions to speakers and panelists using the chat function of Zoom. So please write your questions using the chat function of Zoom. We will not be attending to the raised hand or wave functions. We ask that, and the chair will select questions from the chat and bring to speakers and panelists for comment. So now I'm going to hand it over to André Sursok for welcome and introductory remarks. André Sursok is the chair of the Quality Board for Icelandic Higher Education. André, please, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Siggy, and welcome everyone to this edition of our annual conference. We're very sorry that we're not in Reykjavik as we would have usually, but such is life at the moment. And in fact, in a sense, life at the moment is also the topic of this conference. So as you know, the title of the conference is Teaching and Learning Post-COVID, What Lies Ahead? And what we wanted to do in this conference is really to provide an opportunity for you to discuss what experience you've had in the past year now. It's hard to believe, but it's been a year and a hard year for many of us, a hard year of change. So we wanted to discuss how things have gone for you, but most importantly, we also wanted to look ahead and see what lessons we can learn from this experience and what can be retained in the future. And if you, I'm sure you have been attentive to what's happening around the world, you see that there are many organizations that are asking that specific question. What is next? And although this was a difficult experience, there were also very good sides to it. For instance, this conference, we're expecting about 130 people to attend. We've never had that kind of turnout when we were face-to-face. So obviously there are some really positive sides to this experience and to being online. The conference is structured in two major parts, and if we can get the next slide, please. Thanks, Siggy. After this very short introduction, we're going to be focusing on the international scene, and with the help of two colleagues, one from the US and one from Europe, to look at the development of the quality of learning online. And it will be an opportunity for us to learn about what's happening in Europe based on the latest survey that the European University Association has conducted, and the experience also of the US, of a big university that has a very solid online experience. We will then move to Iceland, and first with a panel and organized by the students that will give us a glimpse on how the students have viewed their online experience. After the break, it will be about the staff to give us their experience of online learning. We will have there 7 case studies that were collected through a call for papers and a call for interest. And we thank all those who have mobilized and have offered to participate in this particular panel. I would like to thank all those of you who have helped us with this, with the design and the development of this experience. This includes YIS, the Student Union of Iceland, the Quality Council, the directors at the directors of CTL at the University of Iceland and the University of Akureyri, and last but not least, Siggi, who has really managed this whole process all by himself. I'm also very grateful for all the speakers who have accepted to participate in this seminar, and I look forward to the active engagement of all the online participants. Before I give the mic to the next, to the chair of the next session, I'd like to mention that after the break, we will have actually a parallel session, and that is a parallel session with the rectors. Every year, the Quality Board has an annual meeting with the Rectors Conference. This year, this particular meeting is going to be in lieu of that annual meeting. It will be an opportunity for us to catch up on the experience of COVID from the point of view of the rectors, and also to look forward. So with that, I pass the baton to the chair of the first session, Guðrún Geirsdóttir, the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Iceland. And I wish you a very good conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, André, very much. I am Guðrún Geirsdóttir, and I am as André Súsok said, I'm the director of the Center of Teaching from the University of Iceland. And I'm extremely happy to introduce and chair 2 international experts for the first session. Like you said, André, COVID has been difficult, but it's also has its good sides. And one of the good things is that we have had easier access to really good experts all over the world, and that is something that is extremely important for us. And today we have 2 experts actually from the different sides of the Atlantic Ridge. And at the moment in Iceland, we have been shaking for a whole week with earthquakes on that ridge. So it's probably better to have the experts at home at the moment, at least. But I am very happy. We need to mute. Yeah, okay, thank you. So the first speaker is Michael Gable, the Director of Higher Education Policy at the EUA. And just to give you a short bio of Michael, the EUA is stands for European University Association, which follows the Bologna process, issues in learning and teaching, including lifelong learning, digitally enhanced learning, internationalization, and global dialogue. And I'm sure that many of you have attended some of the excellent events that EUA has provided at the Learning and Teaching Forum. I have had the opportunity to do that. Really nice.
I have somebody who's a half an hour ahead of me, and then I go.
Yeah, okay. Michael represents EUA in the Bologna follow-up group and has been actively involved in several of its working groups over the past decade. The European University Association represents 33 national university associations called the Rectors Conference and more than 800 universities all over Europe. So it's an extensive network of Europe. Michael graduated from Freie Universität Berlin, Germany, 1994 in German literature and linguistics and Middle Eastern studies. And before joining the EU for more than a decade, Michael has held positions in international higher education exchange and cooperation in the Middle East, the former Soviet Union, and South Asia. So you have an expansive range of experience, Michael. And Michael's presentation is institutional strategies for digitally enhanced learning and teaching, the European trends. So you're giving us the European view. Thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
Oops. Thank you, Guðrún, for the kind introduction, and pleased to join you, or to e-join you at least, as we cannot be there physically. You already gave a good introduction to EUA, but if you want to have it visualized, so that's us. The dark blue countries are all these countries where we have the institutional members only. So that's basically Eastern Europe. And then the light blue are these countries where EUA has institutional members, so universities mainly, but also the national rectors conferences. And if you spot Iceland, we have 4 members there, the National Rectors Conference and 3 institutions. So I guess most of you are actually at one of our member institutions. What we do, you already give an idea about this as well. We work basically on everything where you could have an added European value. I would say at 2 levels. On the one hand side, we try to support members and then encourage exchange among members. And Guðrún just mentioned the Learning and Teaching Forum, which took place last week. But on the other hand, we are also working very closely in the EU and in the Bologna process on policy development. What I will do here today is I put it under the title Institutional Strategies for Digitally Enhanced Learning and Teaching, basically because I thought I can't really answer the questions what does lie ahead? And I doubt that anybody can do that at the moment. We have all assumptions, but things are very uncertain. André already mentioned the survey that we have done, and I come to that in a minute, but I thought before I delve into that, I give you about an idea what EUA does on learning and teaching. The topic is actually relatively new for us. It's not even 10 years that we started to work on that. Before, we worked on the Bologna process, and we discussed on learning outcomes, student-centered learning, structural reforms of the degree systems, but we actually never addressed really learning and teaching. And because we thought that's for the institutions, that's the classroom, the lecture hall, there's nothing there to do for a university association. That changed, and I think it changed, or at least for me, it changed in 2011-12 when the MOOCs came up. And suddenly e-learning became a hype, and we felt that we had to respond to that and say something about that. And we hadn't worked on e-learning or digital learning before. And that was the time when we launched a first survey, which we also did to show what universities actually do. And we were actually quite surprised to find that across Europe, practically all universities provided e-learning, but they did it in a rather patchy way, and there were no real strategies, or let's put it like this, some institutions had strategies, but they were relatively young and they didn't have many activities. Other institutions had some outstanding activities, but had no real strategies, and they were not really embedded into the institution. But what we found actually was that there was institutions were quite confident in confirming impact. And one of the impacts that they highlighted was it helps the reflection on learning and teaching. And there were generally very positive expectations. And I think that still holds on until today. So what we saw then over the following years was a rising importance and recognition of the education mission of higher education. And I compared that to the decade that we had before, where basically the focus was very much on research. In particular, when you worked with rectors, with university leaders, most of your discussions were on research and maybe on funding and governance. But there was also growing pressure then to improve and to innovate learning and teaching. And I picked here two of the topics that came up again and again. And one was upskilling of teachers so that the teachers learn the innovative methods, that they learn the digital skills as well. Also because, and that was the second topic, digital learning was associated with better quality. For many, not for all. There was also a lot of, or some reservation, some thought it would actually deteriorate the quality, in particular of academic learning. So EUA had to position itself, and we did quite a bit of work on that. And I think one of the first things that we argued for is that digitally enhanced learning and teaching is actually learning and teaching. So I could also have chosen the title of my presentation, Institutional Strategies for Learning and Teaching. And the institutional strategies, they were actually important as we found that teaching is an institutional endeavor. So if you only focus on what teachers do and what students do, that's probably too short-fetched. You leave out an important point because learning and teaching is also, but not only about teachers and students, but it needs a more holistic approach. And that we are researched in two trends reports. One of them, Trends 2015, has been authored by Andre. The other one I did with a colleague. And we also had a position paper in 2018. And we brought out 10 principles for the enhancement of learning and teaching, some of which I display here on the right-hand side. And the principles basically tried to sum it up. And of course, the student is at the center of learning and teaching, but also has a responsibility share in it. And then that the learning and teaching is the integral purpose and mission and strategy of the institution. And that learning and teaching is a collective task, which needs the commitment of all staff with teaching responsibilities. So that includes administration, services, and technologies and. And that includes also the engagement of the top leadership of the university president or the rector. And we found that so important that we put out an extra principle for that. All this to say also that all this is needed to achieve the parity of esteem with research and to get teaching recognized academically and professionally, because that was one of the big obstacles that we found for teaching development, for teaching enhancement. So that was the situation then, and that was also the period of time when we actually launched the annual Learning and Teaching Forum in 2017. And it has become a kind of forum where members can exchange practices and ideas about learning and teaching, very useful. And we also assumed that it would serve the purpose of learning and teaching in general, but also take care of digitally enhanced learning and teaching. But if you skim through the programs of the past 3 events, they actually didn't address digital anywhere, not really. It was only since for this event in 21, that was the first one probably that addressed digitally enhanced learning and teaching. So that was also one of the reasons why in 2019, we decided to run another survey on digitally enhanced learning and teaching, just to find out where it stands, what has changed. That came out of a bigger project, the DGHE, which we run with a number of partners across Europe. And it was done through institutional through a survey to institutional leadership. Data collection took place in April to June 2020. So in the critical period when the COVID crisis had just started and everybody was pivoting. Nevertheless, we got more than 360 responses from across Europe, very good result. And due to the previous studies that we conducted, we also have some longitudinal data. And I just give you a few glimpses of the main data. So one point is actually how digitally enhanced learning and teaching is provided. And there is no big surprise there. So blended learning is still the most common format. About 1/3 to 40% of institutions have degree courses, usually just a few. And then compared to 2014, we see a slight increase in MOOCs and also in the way how MOOCs are used and recognized. And we see something that we hadn't asked for in 2014, namely short and on-degree courses, which are provided by about half of the institutions. That's actually quite interesting because we knew that there was a need stated for these kind of courses, but we never actually asked before how many institutions had them in place. But the real change that took place from 2014 is probably that this is more mainstreamed within the institution than that used to be the case. So as you see, more than half of the institutions say that they use digitally enhanced learning across the institution. What has also changed is that I think the purposes for using digitally enhanced learning have become clearer. So it's about 84% of the institutions that state that they have widening access through digitalization as a strategic development priority. And about half of them also found that it has already contributed to a major transformation in this regards. So clearly this hasn't been there in 2014. And also the target of lifelong learners, mature and adult students through online learning has become clearer, 65% of institutions. What we also see is, and that was definitely not their internationalization. There was an intention there in 2014 to use it for internationalization. But as you see here, about 60% used it in the past 5 years to transform their interinstitutional collaboration, and close to 60% also for outreach to international students. And if you ask them about the future, they are quite confident that they will use it more broadly then. For the first time, we also asked about virtual student mobility. 1/4 has it in place, but another 35% actually want to do it in the future. If you ask them, what else is it good for? What is the impact? How does it enhance learning and teaching? These are the 3 top impacts out of a list of 8 that institutions would pick. So there's a very strong agreement that it helps to innovate teaching and also that it makes it more flexible. And then from there it is decreasing, but from 35% still think it's good for data on student learning and for monitoring the learning process. And as for the perceptions of staff and students, you find a wide agreement that it brings benefits to student experience, and more than 70% also think that their students have a positive attitude towards it. And still 62% that staff have a positive attitude towards it. Mind you, this is in April to June 2020. And we asked institutions to report the situation before the crisis, but I think sometimes the impact of the crisis also came in. That doesn't mean now that 40% say that staff don't have a positive attitude towards it, but there is a considerable number which is not entirely sure or undecided. If we look then at strategy, what does that mean? And I think that's really a key issue there, that 70% of the institutions say that they have digital learning as a strategic priority. And this is not just the ad hoc in the crisis situation, but you can see that also by the fact that 88% now have strategies in place. So that's an increase from 63% that they had in 2014. And it is also, also mirrored in the in how support and coordination is organized throughout the institution. So there we can see a clear shift from more faculty-based initiatives and initiatives often run by individuals to centrally or shared structures and support services throughout the institutions. And interestingly, we see that with some differences, but practically in all systems, also those systems which have still a lot of autonomy for the faculties. If you ask institutions about student services or support services in general for students and staff, they will all say that they have them in place. But if you look a little bit closer, you find out that they don't have them for all staff and students. And that became quite evident in the COVID crisis. And I picked out here in this little diagram, the digital library access, where indeed 90% say that they provide this. But due to the crisis, 65% said that they had immediately to enhance it. So it was clearly not made for the stress test that the COVID crisis brought. Interesting development on internal quality assurance. This is a major rise, 53% up from 23% in 2014. But this still means that about half of the institutions in Europe haven't really covered digitally enhanced learning by internal QA. But as you see here, at 41% of institutions, it was mentioned that this is under discussion. We asked institutions about what are the barriers, the enablers, and also the measures to change, to move ahead. And I show you here, we asked them for the top 3, but I actually show you here the top 4. And I'm not reading this all out in detail, but just summarize it. So there are basically 3 issues. It's very symmetric, barriers and enablers. It's of course about funding and the possibility to invest. So investment in equipment, infrastructure, but also in staff. So lack of staff resources was mentioned. So this is one point, but it's not the most urgent one. It's about strategy, and to have a strategy was found helpful, an enabler, and the lack of a strategy, or also the difficulty to devise a concerted approach for the entire institution, that was one of the difficulties. And then it's clearly also about the commitment of staff and students. That was actually, the highest one, the most prominent enabler among institutions. And then also what it helps to move ahead, that you can see it's mainly about peer exchanges, exchange between institutions, international training opportunities, and including the work that university networks and rectors conferences do, and to some extent also on the collection and analysis of institutional data. I think I have to speed a bit up. I'm a bit too long. Just looking at the COVID crisis, I'm not telling you what is the immediate impact. You all know that. We actually thought to have seen in the survey results that pre-existing strategies, structures, and capacities were tremendously helpful for institutions for dealing with this crisis. What comes post-crisis now is an interesting question. Will you be able to retain some of the advantages of digitally enhanced learning? That's to be seen also, as there's a strong pressure to go back to the situation that we previously had. As you see, 3/4 of institutions actually plan to enhance digitally enhanced learning. And there is at many institutions now a discussion on more comprehensive approaches for hybrid and high flex learning. And this is also something that is highlighted, for example, by the EU Digital Education Action Plan, and also at some national levels. So there is policy pressure. At the same time, I think we have to face some digital fatigue. And there is also a serious risk of financial crisis of financial cuts post-crisis, despite the urgent investment needs. And I just display you here a little graph from EUA's Public Funding Observatory that shows you where the money is needed. I think what was important in the crisis is that it has been confirmed that higher education is a public responsibility. Otherwise, the crisis would have been much more grave. And also the university as a social venue, so not just the place where learning takes place, but a place to socially network and connect, and also as an active contributor to national resilience strategies. I just addressed that very quickly. I think what we have to keep in mind when we go back now to normal, or what normal is, one thing is the transformation of learning and teaching, so the innovative pedagogies and how they can be enhanced. But I think we should also have a close look at the other purposes where digital comes probably in and can be used also because there is no other choice to do it. And one of that is clearly lifelong learning, where we see an urgent need in upgrading, reorientation, the hype that we have at the moment about short courses and also some contexts where digital might be without an alternative. And I just dotted down here a few points. I'm not reading out everything, but greening the SDGs is clearly one of them. Then we see more and more universities work in networks, also inspired through European funding initiatives, the whole issue of global cooperation, and also the contribution of higher education to local and global community, which to a large extent will have to be done through digital. And in the end, I think all this will have to be considered when we talk about transforming the institution, as if teaching becomes more and more shared task, and we see that going in that direction, what happens then to academic careers? How do we imagine in the future the interplay of a physical and the virtual campuses that many universities now develop? So I think these are all the questions that we may take into consideration, and we tried to address them already in the Universities Without Walls, so our vision paper, which we published recently, and which is also the topic of our upcoming annual conference. And we see that also, I mean, we see that really as a call to our members, to the sector, to engage with you in discussion on the future of the university. But we see that also, of course, as a part to the question that the European Union puts out later this year, namely the transformation agenda for higher education. So that's what I wanted to share here, and I'm looking forward to engage with you in discussion.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for your really extensive and really good overview of extremely complex surveys and activities that are taking place. And it's really a good food for thought. And I would like just to stress to all our participants that you will not get any questions at the moment, but please, when you are probably thinking as I am going soaring in my head, put your questions down into the chat so we can possibly get to them at the end of the next presentation. Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm also very pleased to go across the ocean to the United States and introduce Dr. Kimberly Bogle. I hope I'm pronouncing this, Kimberly, in somewhat decent way. Kimberly Bogle Jubenwil, who is the University Chief Academic Officer and the Senior Vice President of Academic Quality, Accreditation and Support, where she manages academic operations, including the Registrar's Office and the Shapiro Library. Kimberly has participated in numerous accreditation site visits, including Reykjavik University. So you have been here before, and we hope you come again when the situation is a bit more safe to travel in. She has also done site visits in Amman, Jordan, as well as several domestic colleges and universities. She has also played an integral role in the teach out and closure of several colleges or universities and a multitude of programs, ensuring that students have a pathway to achieve their degrees. Dr. Bogle Jubenwell joined Southern New Hampshire University in 2005 as a faculty member and taught and developed courses in the School of Business and was promoted to a full professor. She oversees all the programmatic and regional accreditation, and with her team has led numerous accreditation site visits. Kimberly earned her BS in Business and Exercise Science from Skidmore College and her Master of Science in Movement Science, as well as her PhD in Sport Management, both from Florida State University. And Kimberly lives in Amherst and has put in a personal note in her bio with her husband Seth, 2 children, Abigail and Gardiner, and their dogs Eisenhower and Moxie. And I hope they will not interrupt you too much giving the presentation, Kimberly. And you are going to, your presentation is opportunities and challenges for distance education, more based on your university's experience.
Yes, thank you. And
Very welcome.
And I do have to let everyone know that we are in the middle of a winter windstorm. So if I cut out, I apologize. And I do have one of my colleagues joining, and maybe he can jump in if the stars don't align to allow the presentation.
We will hope for the best. You will come from your winter storms to our earthquakes here. So.
So thank you for asking me to join this conference today. And the first presentation shared a lot of information that we've seen in the US and in working across the globe. So for the presentation today, what I thought I'd do is share a little bit about SNHU and how SNHU became one of the largest online providers of education and actually one of the largest nonprofit universities in the United States. And really the challenges that we faced in being online. One of the unique elements of SNHU is that we have a traditional residential face-to-face campus in Manchester, New Hampshire that houses about 3,000 to 3,500 graduate and undergraduate students. And when we moved online, even though we had a very large footprint and were well situated to address the issues of the pandemic in our online community, we still had to take what was our face-to-face residential and difficult programs to move into a virtual environment such as engineering and our lab sciences, and understand how to do that in a way that met the needs of the students and that met the needs of the faculty and staff who were traditionally used to working with everyone face-to-face, and that desire of the students to be face-to-face. As we went through that process, the other thing that SNHU did at the time was really take some time and evaluate our undergraduate campus and the undergraduate programming to try to understand what undergraduates will desire and how they will learn in the future, especially given in the United States that all of our high schools and junior high schools and even my children's elementary school have all gone online for this year and are talking about continuing the use of online tools such as Google Classroom or LMS, library activities and kits in the future because of how well they've seen it work in that relationship between faculty and students to achieve competencies and outcomes. And then, as always, the challenges of what lies within online education. When I checked our numbers this morning, currently SNHU is about 168,000 enrollments. And right now, all of that is online, but historically, that would all be online except for about the 3,000 to 3,500. And so, in SNHU's story, we began as a really a small liberal arts school in the Northeast, focusing predominantly on business education and accounting. That was where we received our start. And in about 2006 to 2007, we really started to delve into the distance education frame to achieve our mission, to serve as many students as possible and to transform the lives of our learners. But what we found then, and what we still hear today, is that distance education or online education is still an alternative to what is face-to-face college and university education and the experience that comes with that. A number of the trends that we've seen recently pre-pandemic, and we anticipate continuing post-pandemic, are the median and mean age of our students is dramatically decreasing in our online environment. So we have students who would be traditional college age students of 18, 19, 20 years old choosing full-time online versus actually coming to campus. The other thing that we've seen a lot of is that choice being made, in particular in the US, based on cost. And the cost to attend a residential program versus the cost to attend online. And where cost used to be one of the big differentiators, we're seeing the scales shift a little bit. And now that differentiator become the ability of students to choose and to have flexibility in their time. So students want the ability to say, I'd like to take this online, I'd like to take this by sitting in the classroom, but they also want the ability to work and to do other activities while they're still maintaining their college degree. And so that's really one of the questions that our faculty and staff over the last year have been evaluating, really in joint work streams or work groups between our online faculty and our face-to-face faculty, as well as support services, to ask that question of what will the future look like and how will we mix and match the modalities, whether they're hybrid, fully face-to-face, fully online, or somewhere in between the two that we don't know and we're not sure will exist in the future. And to do that, we've really looked at our past and as well as the history of the industry of higher ed, not only in the US, but across the globe. Currently, SNHU is located in about 5 refugee camps in both Africa and Lebanon, delivering programs online in competency-based education with wraparound student support with partners on the ground. We also have campuses on site at partner universities in South Korea, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And as well, we have launched a pilot program in Latin America, fully online, delivering education in Spanish. And so as we start to look at some of those new ventures and understand how students across the globe are learning, and how we had to expand when a number of our students who were participating domestic returned home and had to participate remotely online in other countries, we really took some time and thought back to our history and the skills that we had in our toolkit to address that. And so as SNHU expanded online from face-to-face, what we really did was understand how to support students and faculty through the experience of learning online. So we took the time and have over the years developed robust student support services that help students navigate teaching and learning online. We have 24-hour chat in our library. We have just-in-time toolkits and, learned a lot from badges and MOOCs to understand how to get skills to students at the time, when, where, and how the students need them, but really then to tailor those to the class that they were in. So in a lot of our courses, you have research guides really tailored to the discipline itself. And so if you're in a history class and a sociology class and an engineering class, you would have library reference guides that are specific to those disciplines, but then also tied to the assignments in that course to help the students as they're going through that coursework, and to have the questions that are coming to the faculty and staff really be on the knowledge and discipline of the course versus the functionality of the services for doing research in the library or using a specific technology or tool. And that has still required us to do a lot of advancement in our systems to become a digital organization. So as you think about engineering, when we moved online, currently we offer mechanical, electrical, and aeronautical engineering. And as those programs moved remotely due to the pandemic, what we realized is that we had to find a way to ship actual kits to students to permit them to do the work that they would be doing in the lab, because we didn't have the capacity to open the lab. And we had a number of students who didn't have the capacity to get to New Hampshire to participate in the lab, even if we could open it. And so once we did that, we then also realized that we needed to understand virtual desktops and virtual platforms for things like cybersecurity. And how can we not only give that information and support to the students, but how can we upskill the faculty and staff to incorporate those activities into their classroom and their learning, but also to ensure that the assessment of that student learning was valid, and to ensure that students really were achieving the outcomes of the course as designed to ensure progression in their program. And so that really pulled on our history of innovation. So we test the limits on a regular basis of technology, and we are, I would say, beginning the process of becoming a digital organization, even though we have as many students as we do online and incorporate as many technologies as we do. And at the core of all of this has always been that commitment to student success and that commitment to the program and the outcomes of that program, really ensuring that the students have learned what the program has articulated that they should be learning, and that they have the confidence to go out into the fields and industry that they are moving out into. We faced a lot of the same challenges and still face them today that everybody else faces, and we will continue to try to understand how to address these in the future. One of the biggest ones is cost. And so as you look at your ability of an institution to deliver programs across multiple disciplines, currently SNHU has over 200 programs from the associate's levels through the doctoral level. And as we look across that broad catalog of offerings, one of the challenges that we have acknowledged is that with choice and flexibility for students comes at times increased costs of delivery. And so as we look to understand how to remain sustainable in this new environment, one of the things that we've really looked to is there a way to share technology? So a lot of our classes have the same, what we call a shell, and many institutions out there do this as well, where there are key factors in each course that are there, whether it's assignments and rubrics, which are fairly common, but then also support tools. And by unifying some of those support tools and utilizing some external tutoring centers in conjunction with our internal support groups for students, we've been able to address the needs of the students really in all hours that the students do the work. And we haven't really had to face having to staff with our internal staff around the clock. And that was one of the big challenges that we saw with the pandemic is students were now doing work at not only in different US time zones, but in different global time zones. And how could we ensure that there was support for those students when those students needed that support? The other is, I've already spoken to this, but is the pedagogy and discipline associated with the 200 programs. So from nursing to engineering, we do not have currently right now at the university any licensure programs for medicine with the exception of nursing. So we don't have a medical school and we are not classified as an R1. So a lot of our research tends to be student and faculty-based research throughout the course, but we don't have a lot of government funded research projects at this point in time. The other challenge that we had was approval for accreditors, and then the element that we always have to address in the US, which is funding in terms of both financial aid, but also benefits that particular groups of students receive that are limited and inhibited when you move to an online modality. So for example, a lot of our service men and women who have served in the US are receiving funding for advancing their education, but based on the funding they're receiving, they're not allowed to participate in online classes. They have to participate in face-to-face classes in a residential campus. And so those restrictions have lifted based on the pandemic, but then it becomes helping students understand, especially those who really have excelled in the pedagogy of the online classroom, how to then transition back to face-to-face, given the fact that they do and are receiving that funding for participation in their program. And then the other is recognition. So we have also struggled with, in particular, our international students. So as many of you know, a lot of countries do not recognize online education as an acceptable form of education. And so one of our big challenges right now is coming out of the pandemic, what will the capacity for travel between countries be? How can we continue to ensure that our students can complete these degrees that they are on track to complete if they cannot get back into the States to complete their program? And can we lean on some of our partner institutions and or partner programs across the globe? And how do we build that relationship better, really ensuring that our students have the ability to complete their program? And so that really led us to a conversation around opportunities and challenges, both during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So SNHU has always been innovative. We have expanded dramatically, as I stated, in our online environment, and are really seen as one of the innovators within US higher education on how we meet the needs of students, faculty, and staff. To ensure that everyone is able to complete the credential that they are moving towards. We always have a focus on graduation, I think, as any institution does, and ensuring that students can get across that finish line. A big part of SNHU's history is the segment in particular of the US population that had some college but no degree. And so we have in our history had large numbers of transfer students, and they bring their own challenges to the university of ensuring that those courses that they've done 5, 10, 20 years ago, if they're not relevant, how they redo them, but then also how we ensure that those students can learn in this new environment of online education. So not only ensuring that they have the content and skills to be successful, but also ensuring that they have the skills in this new learning and pedagogy to ensure their success. The other is the cost for students. We are very focused on ensuring that we can deliver high quality education at the lowest cost possible to ensure that students are graduating with debt that they can actually manage as they go into their career. As an institution, we have walked away from several programs where the amount of debt that a student would incur to complete their degree would not, they would not be able to manage based on the salary in that job that they were looking to go into. And so we really want to understand how to deliver, especially some of the new programs that we've had to do this year, given the pandemic online, that we know that there will be a need for in the future in a way that is cost effective and sustainable. And so as we look to the future, I think where SNHU is really leaning in is on things like innovative technology and assessment. What are the tools and resources that are out there that allow us to meet students where students are and to ensure that they are getting the knowledge and information, as well as demonstrating the skills and competencies and outcomes required to move forward and progress within their curriculum. how do we expand and capitalize on that global community that we have always been a part of, but now we're realizing that we probably need to be a part of it in a different way, and having some different conversations and building different relationships to ensure that we can still meet our students. We're really leaning in and asking the questions about time and flexibility. We're hearing from the students that they love the flexibility that online gave them, the time where they could determine when and how they learned through different mechanisms, but that the students also missed and really are craving that face-to-face interaction with the faculty and staff in the community of a campus. So how can we meld those two in the future? To really capitalize on what we've learned, but also continue to meet the students and the staff where they are. And then there's also many accreditation issues that we could get into. But so really for the future, we are looking to expand on collaboration across institutions and with partners across the globe to really share what we've learned and learn from others. And really to push on that equity lens to ensure all students have the opportunity who desire the opportunity to complete their degree program and to move forward in their community in the future. So I think that that is my time. And so I will stop sharing and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. It's really interesting to see the challenges. If I got the number of your students right, the number of students in your university is half the Icelandic population about. So the numbers you were talking about and the numbers that we know in our universities are not very comparable, but it's interesting to see how the challenges that you are discussing and bringing forward really are the same challenges that we are facing. So that's, thank you very much. There have been some discussions in the chat. So if you want to write more questions, Michael has been answering some of the questions he's been giving in the chat. So that's maybe helpful. But I would like to have a question to both of you while we are waiting. We don't have much time, but what do you two see as the biggest changes that will happen in on-campus learning after COVID as the result of the increased focus on learning? What will we take from the somebody is talking in French or something, but so what do you see as the biggest learning that we take from that into our on campus learning, teaching and learning? Michael, if you could name two.
Yeah, I'm trying to think hard. I mean, I think what has changed now that there were a lot of things that we could do theoretically as institutions, and they have been put in practice. I mean, in some regards, it's a joining the dots practice. You know, it was always there. Some colleagues knew how to do it. I mean, an example that I like to quote is the National Forum Ireland ran shortly before the crisis a survey to students and academics, and they found out that 70% of the academics never taught online. Mm-hmm. By now they have.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that you will not take away. You know, everybody has these experiences now, whether you see them more on the positive side or more on the negative side. And I think that's the one thing that is so difficult to assess at the moment. You know, we know that this wasn't ideal. It wasn't meant to be ideal. It was managing the crisis. Yeah. When we have to go back, we will have a different purpose. I think there is, at the moment, in Europe, for most students, there's probably no doubt that they go back, and teachers that they go back to a physical campus. But the question is indeed on how we will redefine this now. I mean, what can be blended or hybrid or however you call that? And then also, how can we use the digital experience better for some of these other purposes? Lifelong learning is one, but then also the whole global engagement. And I think Kimberly pointed it out very well. I mean, and where do we get the resources from that this takes? And that's probably, there is a strategic question for every university to be asked. You know, can you do all, or have you to make choices? Can you serve lifelong learners and also build up a global community? Or are these different courses?
Kimberly, are there is there any one or two lessons that you think are the most important for on-campus teaching in the?
I think for me, it's, and Michael hit them all very well, it's also that level of collaboration. So how do we listen to the students and faculty and staff to understand what collaboration looks like in the future? Because as you start to embed technology, what used to be campus collaboration can then become much larger, which is extremely exciting, but also challenging as you look to move into a digital environment. And as we all know, as education looks similar but different across the globe, how do we help to bridge those gaps and learn from each other as we go into what will be, and I'll use the term that Michael learned, blended learning and blended experiences in the future, and how does that really resonate across everyone?
Yeah. Thank you. I think we are running out of time. We have a bit more questions, but we'll see if we could. What I take from this is both, the flexibility, the need for flexibility, the need you both mentioned to reflect on practices and strategies. That is really important, and see what we've been doing and why we've been doing things, and then collaboration. And one of the collaborative stakeholder in this all are the students. And I'm very happy to hand over the floor to Jóhanna Ásgeirsdóttir, who she is the president of LÍS, the National Union of Icelandic Students, and you have a good group of panelists with you, right, Jóhanna?
Yes.
So thank you very much, Michael and Kimberly, for your presentation, and we will move over to the students' point of view.
Thank you very much, Guðrún, and thank you to the Quality Board for inviting us to have this session. And also thank you very much, Kimberly and Michael, for your very detailed presentations. They provide a great context and foundation for us to talk about the specific challenges from the perspective of students. So Siggi is going to show you on the screen the names of us, the panelists. But then we're going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to ask our panelists to turn on their cameras and on their microphones so we can have a conversation. We have half an hour, so we're going to try to keep our questions within 25 minutes and then have 5 minutes at the end to open to questions from the audience. But we might, we have a few very exciting topics, so we'll see how much time we have at the end. But I'll say again, my name is Jóhanna Ásgeirsdóttir. I'm the president of the National Union of Icelandic Students, and we are an umbrella organization over the student unions of all the universities in Iceland, and also the union of students who are studying abroad. So we represent 20,000 students and fight for their rights in a lot of different ways. So I'm just going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, maybe just in the order that we see here on the screen. So Isabel, would you like to turn on your camera and say hi? If maybe Siggi can stop sharing the screen so we can see Isabel, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Hi, my name is Isabel Alhandra Diaz, and I'm the president of the Student Council of the University of Iceland, as well as one of the 2 student representatives for the University Council. I was going to tell you a little bit about my university. It is the largest educational institution in the country, located in the center of Reykjavik with over 15,000 students. And just a year ago, we were around 13,000. So there was a record attendance at the school this year. And the main role of the Student Council is to look after the interest of this very large group, which has been a very big challenge this year because of the pandemic.
Thank you, Isabel. Maybe next I'll ask Steinunn to say hi. You can keep your camera on, Isabel, so we can see everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steinunn, and I'm the president of the Student Council of the University of Akureyri. And as well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the University of Akureyri. Our university has been developing actually distant learning for over 20 years. And now it's called flexible learning, where students can study from their home, but they have to attend on-campus study periods once or more per semester. And it actually depends on the program that they're attending to. And now there are currently 2,540 students enrolled at the University of Akureyri, and its students' population is growing constantly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steinunn. Maybe next I'll ask Úlfur to introduce himself.
Yes. Hi, my name is Úlfur Atli, and I study PPE, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics at Bifröst. I'm also a part of the student board of the Student Association of Bifröst. And we have around, just to give you on context, we have around 800 students at Bifröst, and it's a dominantly distance learning school, actually. So even before COVID, around 90% of our studies are online.
Thank you, Úlfur. And last but not least, I'll introduce Sigtýr to please say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Sigtýr Kárason. I'm the school student council president and one of 2 student representatives within LÍS for my school, the Icelandic University of the Arts. The school is primarily located in 3 buildings in Reykjavik, but has some more exhibition and performance rehearsal spaces in the city. And it's a relatively small private school, but it's the only place in Iceland where you can study architecture and the arts at a MA and BA level in Iceland. And I want to point out that exactly dance and performance arts and music, these are all very in-person learning experiences. So there's been a lot of unique challenges around that. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, we wanted to have student representatives from a variation of schools, variation of experiences. And we want to kind of open with a question about how things have been going in general, not specifically with regards to distance learning, but then of course we'll move our focus more specifically towards the topic of our of this symposium. But there's of course a lot of other stuff going on, and it's not necessarily our main focus as student representatives. So I'll maybe go the order backwards now and ask Sigtýr, what have been like the unique challenges for students at your university during the last year?
I'm going to say primarily sort of coming to terms with the prioritizing of who gets access to what spaces. Because like I said, there are these 3 buildings that we mainly work out of, and our studios, which would be, you know, wood workshops and metal workshops and dance workshops, these spaces that we need access to further our learning and complete a lot of courses that are mandatory. They're split between these different spaces, and once we were locked into sort of our buildings, we weren't able to access all these spaces that we needed to interact with. And we had to come to terms with that. And I think a lot of extra work had to be put in by also school authorities to decide, you know, if someone's about to graduate, do they need access to the space more than someone who's on their first year? And I think that that's been something that a lot of students have felt, as well as something that students who are especially in the performing arts of acting and dance, they've mentioned how hard hit they were once there couldn't be any sort of, what would you say? You would say like cafeteria areas where they all of a sudden couldn't look for nutrition within the building, which is something that's really important for their, you know, sometimes 10-hour study days where they're working with their bodies the entire time. I think that would mostly be it, but then also getting used to this sort of distance learning, which worked pretty well with theory courses and has actually allowed a lot of students who, for instance, went abroad for a year exchange to sort of stay with us in some theory courses and further their studies. So there's been some upsides, as well as that sort of distance learning being really useful to students who benefit from hearing a recording, you know, a second or third time. So there's definitely some good takeaways, but the in-person design and performance elements have been the biggest challenge for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we'll touch back on all these topics with the distance learning in a few questions. But yeah, I know there have been a lot of challenges with the Art University. But Úlfur from Bifröst, where you guys already have a lot of experience with distance learning, were there some other specific challenges during COVID that you feel like students were dealing with regards to distance learning or something else?
Honestly, Bifröst did not have to change too much, and it was quite a smooth transition. for us. The only thing that we really had to do is that, so in Bifröst, we have these study weekends twice per semester in person, and we had to unfortunately take that away. But other from that, didn't really affect us that much.
How about at another university that has a lot of experience with distance learning, such as the University of Akureyri, Steinar? How have your students been doing for the past year?
Yeah, so I have to agree with Ulfur. We had a pretty smooth transition to putting all of the teaching material through the internet, because that's what we have been doing for the past years. But I would have to say maybe the one challenge that we had to face was how to change the on-campus period, as I mentioned before. So some departments actually just not had them, but others thought a way to do them through Zoom and other ways. So yeah, that was the main difficulties with us during COVID.
Thank you. And then Isabel, from the largest and perhaps kind of most diverse university with regards to study programs in Iceland, what were the challenges that students were facing at the University of Iceland? Again, can be with regards to distance learning, but also in general.
Mm-hmm. I'd say to adapt to the new circumstances in such a short time. We, like you said, have a diverse group of students, people from various backgrounds and with all kinds of projects and goals, all of which has been affected by the pandemic, and not being able to focus on their studies as they would have wanted to affects their housing and financial situation and mental health and vice versa. And that's a very big challenge that they had to take head on. And I think that we have powered through, especially this last semester, and are still going strong.
Thanks. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I think I'm going to do this bouncing back and forward method for a while, and we'll see how that works with some of the questions. So I'll ask Isabel right away. So what aspects do you feel are most important to students in distance learning, and what have the kind of maybe requests or demands or whatever you want to call it been over the past year in University of Iceland, which from what I understand didn't have as much distance learning before, and it was a new thing in the University of Iceland for most departments. Yeah, what's most important to students of University of Iceland in distance learning?
Well, firstly, I think it's important for the school to maintain a strong connection to its students, sharing of information, especially because everything happens so fast, and for students to feel that they are being considered and listened to. I think that giving students the opportunity to pursue distance learning is a specific service that should be provided and supported. And although the methods are of course different, it is not of a different nature really, and ways no less in our opinion. So it's really a matter of creating a university for all with equality as like a guiding principle, so that the service of distance learning is comparable to the on-site teaching. And of course, in this context, I would mention the recording of lectures and equal access for all. I think that when this fall semester arrived or started, flexibility was quite restricted, and the university emphasized distance learning with the option or possibility of in-person classes and in-person exams when possible. And we of course made no comment on that, because we of course wanted to have students in the buildings, but we did note that it was still important for teachers or instructors to record their lectures, so that way students could access them later, to review them for exams or take better, more detailed notes. And so our intention is not and has never been to dissuade students from attending lectures. It's the point is rather to ensure that they have access to them after the fact. So we put a lot of we have put a lot of focus on like our new how would you call it, learning management system, Canvas, and all the features that offers and having all course material in one place. And we think that access to lectures is a really large part of course material, and it has to be ensured.
No. Somebody needs to put on mute. Arnfríður, it looks like. Thank you, Isabel. I would love to hear from the schools that have this experience with distance learning. Maybe mention some best practices of what you feel like has been working well, but also if you noticed some even more enhancement or changes because of the situation in the past year. I'll keep bouncing back, so Steinunn, go ahead.
Yeah, I would have to say that because our university has been developing the distance learning, that all students before COVID had the same access to study materials. All the lectures were put on the internet, so everyone could listen to them at the time that they wanted to. I would say that one thing that COVID helped us, that there were more like interactive courses on Zoom. So students could actually attend if they wanted to and be in connection with teachers and students. So we would really hope that that will continue after COVID.
How about you, Úlfur? Any like best practices or new developments?
Yes, I would firstly like to agree with Isabel that it's really important to have a feedback loop with the students for distance learning to be successful. But at the top of my mind, there are two things that are really important when it comes to distance learning. Firstly, it's regular discussion sessions, and this has increased during COVID, which I think is really positive. But I would like to emphasize on discussion sessions in small groups, no more than, let's say, 10 to 15 people, because I think as the size of the online class gets bigger, the quality tends to slide down. And yeah, and also sound quality and visuals of online lectures. It can make or break an online course, really, in my opinion. So those are the crucial aspects, in my opinion.
Yes, of course. And maybe something that was mentioned in previous lectures is that there is, of course, a need for technology to be up to date and services also that people know how to use that technology. So Sigtýr, what are the kind of priorities or what's important to students in the University of the Arts with regards to distance learning?
I mean, so many good points already, I mean, from everyone. And I definitely think that those can be applicable to the University of the Arts. Something that hasn't been mentioned that I hope you're not having a problem with is that there's a big difference between materials, lectures being available online to download and online to stream. And in my school, a lot of students are working with a lot of heavy design software on their computers, and it's just a universal experience that you're waiting for your computer to crash. And so the sort of technological advancement needs to also consider that and make sure that things are available in a way that students aren't afraid to access it, or where accessing these materials isn't a risk. But I also agree, especially with the fact that discussion courses and smaller discussion courses are incredibly valuable, and that all of the theory courses that have been taught in distance learning, we've always split it up as sort of a half lecture and discussion, and it's been working very well for the most part.
All right, so thanks for this overview of kind of good things and challenges with distance learning in your universities. But one thing that I feel like the student unions have noticed that needs to adapt with the switch to distance learning is assessment, so exams, and how those are transitioned into an online environment. And I would like to offer Steinunn the floor to respond to how that's been going in the University of Akureyri, and then of course we'll see how it's been in other universities.
Thank you. Yes, the student council actually was in a very good conversation with the school administration about this matter, and the most students wanted to have an open access exams, but that was not fulfilled with all the programs. But yeah, I think that most students would prefer an open exam if it's a home test.
Can you explain really short what you mean by open exam, just so our listeners know what you mean?
Yeah, so just the test won't be taken at a certain time point, and for example, open for 1 day or like that, yeah.
And I know that the University of Iceland had a lot of conversation this fall about assessments in different departments in distant learning. Would you like to comment on that, Isabel?
Yeah. Yes, because the university is so large, and we have 5 faculties or schools, as we call them, and they of course they have the sjálfræði.
Independence or
like independence,
Yes.
autonomy.
Yes. Yeah. To make decisions as they see fit. And so that was like one of the biggest challenge for us, for the departments and faculties or schools to really talk together and be in cooperation with each other. And I think that we didn't quite see it. And in that case, we were really looking to how to the university in Akureyri because we thought that they were really all talking together, and we wanted for all the universities to be in collaboration with each other like we were, because I think that the students organizations that we were exchanging ideas and information, and I can't say that students felt that the schools were doing exactly the same thing.
How about in Bifröst? Did you notice any change in the way assessment took place?
But we had open exams more or less the way that we still had the same time, let's say 3 hours, but we had access to all resources. And there were some different opinions from the teachers on this open examination. I think most of them were in favor of it and saw it as a way to rather assess understanding and the ability to connect topics of the material together. Although a small minority viewed this as an opportunity to make tests harder and introducing penalty points and such. But in general, teacher used this as an opportunity to rather assess understanding than just raw knowledge, which I think is good.
Exactly, it can be seen as an opportunity to develop assessment because there are a lot of different ways to assess learning outcomes rather than an in-person exam, and a lot of them work better for online learning. And an interesting example, which might not work for every university, but certainly would work for a lot more than you would think, is the way that I always get mixed up because they changed their name recently. The Iceland University of the Arts, right? So they have pass-fail across the board. So Sigrid, can you tell us about that and how that affected or how that worked in the pandemic?
Yeah, so recently that change was made. So currently the first and second year students only operate on a pass-fail system. The third years still receive grades, and part of that system was always receiving written critiques to your personal work. Now we only receive the written critiques and they're more intricate. And that's been working quite well. And it's actually kind of hard to assess whether it's working well because of the pandemic or because it's a good system. So we've been working kind of hard on discerning what it is that makes it work. But I'm gonna say that the way in which teachers and counselors sort of critique our work hasn't changed. The way in which we've had to present it has definitely changed. because everything now needs to fit into this two-dimensional medium, and a large majority of our work is very three-dimensional. And so instead of being able to present something in person, we've had to learn how to make presentations and recordings and like audio-visual combinations of all these different works. And it's been an interesting challenge, but it definitely has been a challenge that, I mean, a lot of most teachers have been very ready to accommodate, but not all. And I think that this sort of patience or lenience, because it's a double challenge. It's not just doing the work that's expected of you, but it's sort of inventing a way to get that work across. And it definitely requires a sort of understanding, taking that in.
Yeah, I just find it really interesting that the whole university functions on this pass-fail system, and it's maybe that exists in other places, but I would argue that it could work with a lot more disciplines than just the arts, where it's about the conversation between the student and the teacher, and the numerical grades. Don't always sort of function, and maybe particularly in distance learning. So I'm going to move on to our, Sigtýr.
Very quickly, maybe also just to say, part of what the original point of that change was that because we're such small student groups, like each class is 10 to 15 people, if not less, we're going to be working together, like that very specific design and arts environment. These are our future co-workers. In this school, if we end up working locally, and this sort of fosters a co-working environment rather than a competitive environment. That was really the original point of, or like the original goal for changing the system, and we've definitely felt that. And I was actually in a different program underneath the old sort of system, and I can definitely feel the difference in the classes in regards to, you know, the sort of competitive nature where instead of trying to work together, we're kind of like trying to beat each other. But
yeah, and that can also be transferable to any kind of educational environment where we want to be an education community and not a kind of competitive environment. So I'm going to move on to our last question, and hopefully we have 1 or 2 minutes for open questions. And of course, you can put into the chat any questions that you might think of. So our last question, I'm going to let Úlfur to start answering because he hasn't had the chance to go first. I would like you to mention just a few things that you would like to see continue after the pandemic, whatever that means, when we're fully able to return to classes, which actually in Iceland we are lucky enough to be allowed to have in-person classes already. But yeah, what are some things that you want to see continue or develop further? And what are some things that you think should be discontinued or reconsidered or just left alone? So Úlfur, go ahead.
Yes. I'm definitely looking forward to in-person meetings again at Bifröst. I think we're having one next month, hopefully, if everything goes well. And but I really hope that these regular discussion sessions online continue. Though I feel it adds a lot to the classes, especially when it's in small sizes. But first and foremost, I would like to see this creative assessment continue, that it's not only closed exams. For example, I could give an example from a course I was taking now this semester, comparative politics. This course was always a traditionally closed book exam by the end of the semester. But now, instead of that, I got to do a comparative study between Iceland and Sweden and on immigration. And I feel that I learned so much more from this than I would have from any closed book exam. So in a nutshell, my point is to, in the future, I think the future is creative, open assessment. That's what I take from this.
Thanks, that's a wonderful point. I'll invite Isabel and then Steinunn and then Sigtýr. So Isabel, go ahead. What would you keep and what should go on?
Yeah, well, I think firstly that we cannot look to the future without considering the ways in which this past year has impacted us both as individuals and and as a school community. I think that the concept of remote or distant learning means something completely different today than it meant a few months ago, and I think it cannot be considered so far-fetched anymore. And as I've talked before, as I said before, we students here have been pushing for more online classes and that lectures be recorded. And these requests are not just about equality, but also there are environmental factors and a desire for a more modern teaching methods that play a large role. And I think that the university was quite capable of adapting to distance learning or virtual teaching methods. And at that point, when we had to do it in such a short time, it became clear that the school really was up to that challenge, given all the progress that had already been made. And we do understand that the concerns are generally about the quality of teaching and learning, but these, of course, are concerns that students share with the school. And so the aim of developing a variety of teaching methods is to enhance the quality of education, which will only strengthen the university and make it more competitive on the international stage. So I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Thank you so much. And I would like to mention that after the session, we have a 15-minute break, which will go until 2:45. But I really don't want to close the session without getting Steinunn and Sigdís answer to this last question. So I hope you bear with us and can hang out for 1.5 or 2 minutes more. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Steinunn.
Okay, I would just like to agree with Úlfur and Isabel, very good points. For the University of Akureyri, I would say that one thing that COVID taught us that we don't need to talk about distance and unstudied students. We should more talk about it as a whole. And what I mean by that I hope that there will still be the same access, for example, to online study session with the students and the teacher, because the students here at the University of Akureyri were very happy about that. So that's what I hope that teaching at COVID will continue.
Thank you. And go ahead, Sigdís.
Great, thanks. Again, I mean, everything that's been said is also applicable to this school. So maybe to add on to that, just the uniformity or the sort of organizing of this distance learning platform so that students know what to expect, so that exactly we can ensure a sort of steady quality, that everything that is streamed is recorded and made to be available afterwards, and that in-person classes also have this option of being streamed. And we all have seen it work, and it's this sort of extra 1.5 minute setup time that gives so much back for everyone involved. But also that in instances where we absolutely cannot meet the sort of standard for teaching, like happened in some instances, like for instance with our dance program, where everything completely had to shut down and students weren't able to get access to the sort of abroad internships or exchanges that they needed access to. In these extreme cases that schools would be accommodating of letting a student take a semester or 2 semesters off and then come back to exactly where they were without making it harder for them, but just to be very accepting of these different ways in which we take the time to study, and just be accommodating for that as well.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. That's the strengths of the newer, more flexible options, that they be that we don't hold on to kind of the rigidity of former ways of teaching, and allow the flexibility to open up more options for students and a more diverse group of students, and people can choose their own way to study. So I'm going to close this session 3 minutes late. So thank you all for hanging out a tiny bit longer with us. We don't have time for questions, but if you have any please just put them in the chat, and those of the students who will be hanging out for the rest of the day, I'll be here, will shoot answers to your questions. So I will turn off my camera and put on mutes because we are just all going on break, and we'll be here back again at 2:45. So thank you very much. Bye, everyone.